Hey, I have a question for you. How many of you out there have a dog as a pet? How many of you out there call yourself an owner of a dog instead of a friend or having a relationship with a dog? Well, my guest this week on World Awakenings, a fast track to enlightenment, episode 114, is going to blow your mind on your relationship with your dog. Her name is Sasha Armstrong, and she is a dog shaman. Come on inside to World Awakenings. I think you're going to be surprised and delighted.
This is World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with your host, Carl Gruber. World Awakenings is a podcast dedicated to opening your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how they play an all-important role in our daily life. So join Carl on this enlightening experience as he interviews metaphysical and spiritual experts to discuss, debate, and delve deeply into the hows and whys of this worldwide awakening.
Hey friends, welcome and thanks for joining me here for yet another amazing episode of World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment, the show that asks the questions and seeks the answer to why now more than ever are the people of the world awakening to all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening. Now, before we check in with today's guest, please take a moment to click the link below in the show notes to grab your free copy of my ebook, The 3 Pillars, a simple 3-step process to manifest positive and permanent change in your life. You will not be disappointed. So, in this episode, number 114, our guest is Sasha Armstrong, a world-renowned canine behaviorist and dog shaman. She is an industry leader and innovator who optimizes the human-to-canine relationship through a process called the Inner Alpha Method. Serving as an experienced educator, she guides us into a more intimate, holistic, and natural relationship with our canines by helping us embody the essence of an alpha. Mastering her craft for more than 20 years, Sasha has helped thousands of humans meet the needs of their dogs by bridging the communication gap, restoring healthy modern pack dynamics, and uncovering the details about both dog and human energies. And so, with that, we've had a lot of interesting guests on this show, but this is my first canine expert. So, Sasha, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Carl. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Well, yeah, and it's so great. I've had a brief conversation with you prior to this, and it's fun getting to know you. I had mentioned that I had seen you on another podcast quite a few months ago, and I was absolutely intrigued. And so I'm going to just dive into this right away. Now, you're known as a canine behaviorist and as a dog shaman. What exactly are both of those things?
Yes, great questions. The canine behaviorist side of things is really understanding from a psychological aspect, what is the language that our dogs speak and why is it that they behave the way that they do? It's diving deep into the understanding of how our dogs show up and why. And it really looks at things just from their experience versus how it is that humans intervene and intercept in the dog's experience. So it's very much so just understanding what it is from a dog's point of view. And for me, it is translating and bridging that communication gap to the human so that we are able to understand our dog's behavior in a way that allows for us to show up in the very best way to get the most out of our relationship with them. The shaman aspect, a shaman is a healer. A shaman is someone that is connected to the spiritual world and is able to bridge, again, the gap between the earthly plane and the spiritual plane. And as we all know, I think everybody that is in relationship with dogs thinks of them as spiritual creatures, right? Regardless of what God we believe in, or, the divine source, divine creation, whatever that is for you, we look at our dogs, and when we're in the presence of our dogs, we can't help but feel that they are a direct channel to the divine, right? I always say, what's dog spelled backwards, right? So,
Right.
with that being said, I work as a healer for both the human and the dog. So the shamanistic part of this work is bringing the modalities of not necessarily what humans can readily, easily access, all of the other components that come into our relationship with our dogs, the energy, even going into the Akashic records and past lives, and a lot of fascinating aspects of our relationships with our dogs that we're not even quite aware of in our conscious existence. And so bringing all of the healing into these relationships, that's not just about the psychological or the mental or the behavioral or the scientific aspects of things, but the emotional and the actual healing connection that exists within this dynamic, within this relationship. So yeah, there's a lot of layers to what I do, and I believe that there's so many components and aspects of the relationship that need to be addressed, right? We need to pay attention to these things. We need to bring this to the surface, because I think for most people, we're feeling these things. We're like, wow, I feel this connection with my dog in a way that I can't explain. It goes beyond anything that I've ever been able to feel with another human. What is that? What does that conjure in us? What does that bring up for us? Dogs are our greatest mirrors, for better or for worse, right? So we see in our dogs an embodiment of ultimately what I believe the human soul desires to be, right? We desire to, what we see in dogs, this, so many different things, and a lot of people would call it unconditional love. It's a purity, right? That no ego, no judgment. And I believe that we want to access those parts of ourselves, and our dogs are a living physical representation of that, being in their presence every day that we are.
Wow, you said so much in that short amount of time. You answered like 10 of my questions that I have listed here already. But that's really beautiful, because when I first spoke to you, you and I just had a brief conversation a few weeks ago, and you were actually in Mexico studying with your own shamans. So you can actually take the instructions of shamanism and apply it to what you're doing, and obviously very successful.
Well, like I say, if I don't do the work, what good is it?
Yeah.
Right? If I'm not going into all of the realms and doing my deep work, which is my life's commitment, I can't educate and stand in authenticity and integrity to be able to inspire people to step into theirs.
Yeah, beautiful. And, I would like to also, you mentioned changing our behaviors in our relationships with our canine friends. You and I were having a brief conversation just before we started recording this, and I said that I was, a dog owner, and you said, no, not an owner. So, yeah, what is the correction on that? Are we just simply a friend of a canine, or what would be the appropriate way of doing that?
Thank you for that question. So we're programmed to speak without consciousness in regards to most things in life, right? And especially in relationship with our dogs, right? That's why we're here. So when we speak of dogs, what just comes naturally off the tongue is, oh, I'm a dog owner. Well, no, right? Dogs are not here to be owned by us. And in fact, dogs are, as I refer to them, as the GMTs, the Grand Master Teachers. So how could we own our greatest teacher? It's not possible.
Yeah.
Not only is it not possible, but it's not healthy, it's not balanced, and it's not going to produce a relationship that is rooted in honor, trust, and respect. And so we really have to shift our vocabulary, because what we speak is made manifest, right? What we speak of is what we create. And so when we say these words, even though it is, of course, most of the time with very good intention, it also creates a dynamic that ends up playing out, right, over and over and over again. And it's not a healthy one. So I always like to use words like being a dog parent, or being in partnership with a dog, or being a dog's friend. I mean, they are man's best friend, as old as we can go, right? 15,000, 18,000 years. This is what we've referred to as man's best friend. Now, where we've been at in our relationship with our dogs for quite some time now does not match that label, that term of man's best friend. We are not relating and treating and understanding our dogs as though they're our best friends. And so when we use words such as their owner, that leads to believe that we are there to control them. We're there to dominate them. We're there to manage them and enforce our will upon them. We're also there to completely neglect their needs, right? And even the most well-intentioned, wonderful dog parent, without being conscious of these ways in which our dog's needs need to be met, we are doing them a disservice. So by tapping into this new way, by bringing a level of awareness, right, and mindfulness to how it is that we speak of our dogs, that allows us to start to tune into a new way of being.
Yeah, wow. I love what you said, that our dog friends can be our greatest master teacher, and I absolutely believe that. And I think that can apply to any pet. Like I mentioned, I actually currently have a cat, and believe me, I've learned a lot from this cat just being around here, the way she watches over me and everything. But I do want to find out a little bit more about you. I mean, I read that you discovered that you had an innate ability to understand a dog's language, realize you had a deep connection to them. How did this come about in the first place? Did you discover these things when you were a youngster?
Yes, very young, very, very young. So it was very apparent to my family from a very young age that I had a lot of gifts, gifts to understand what was going on with people, being able to understand what was going on with animals, connecting to them in a way that was not necessarily on an earthly plane. And so naturally, having those kinds of extrasensory abilities to tap into other worlds, animals they're a blank canvas. They are without a veil, right? So I was able to connect with them very easily and very quickly. And it was almost like I was one of them and they were one of me. And so without question, throughout my childhood, throughout my teenage years, going into, my 20s and onward, there was never a question or a doubt about what my life path would be. And it was always clear that through this connection of really not only understanding animals, but being able to understand humans as well. Because ultimately, as I always say, that in order to get to the dog, I have to get to the human first.
Yeah.
And there's no two ways about that, right? I've been educating and working intimately with humans and their canines since I was a very young teenager. And it has always shown up to be that no matter what I could do with the dog, no matter how much I could shift their behavior and bring about the ideal existence for them, if they're human, the one that the dog was living with, right? If they weren't up to making the shifts and the transformations and the changes that were needed, if they were not up to stepping into the role that is deeply needed for our dogs to live the greatest possible lives that they can, then it really didn't matter what I could do with the dogs, right? It all has to come together. All of the ingredients have to come together to make up the masterpiece, as I say. So.
Wow, that's just, I have so many questions flowing through my head here. This is just beautiful. So do you think, even as a young child, maybe this is not the right terminology, can you telepathically communicate with a dog?
Yes.
Wow, that must be cool. So you can actually hold a conversation with them.
Absolutely, but not in a human way.
Mm-hmm. Sure, I could see that. Yeah, and the thing that you've already stated, that dogs come without an ego, without a veil, and you of course realize that is the goal of many spiritual seekers, is to finally put the ego behind us and no longer have to deal with it. And it makes sense that a dog can be our master teacher because they're already there, they're already enlightened. So if we actually abuse them and don't take care of them, that's that's not a good scenario. But I'm going to ask you a big generalized question. Why does man have such an affinity to befriend dogs and vice versa? Why this type of connection between two different species?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, this is a very old, ancient partnership. And we saw in each other allies, right? We saw that we could really gain a lot from one another. Interestingly enough, it was humans that saw in wolves that we had a lot to learn from them. So it was very important that we bring them on our side, right? Mm-hmm. So, as I say, dogs, wolves, domesticated humans, and it's not the other way around. Without the presence of dogs and wolves in the human experience, we would be very far behind. Mm. So these animals were revered as sacred beings, as spiritual beings. They were honored and respected for all of their many gifts, all of their many knowings, and all of their abilities, right? That they had to teach us, from everything from an earthly plane to the sacred aspect of their being, right? Which is, again, going back to this idea of being a direct channel to the divine, right? The purity, the keeper of the divine messages, right? They're our go-between. So we unconsciously feel that. Even the most closed off person, somewhere deep within their soul, feels that. And that's why, let's just take the United States, for example. The vast majority of homes, of households in the United States has a dog. Now, mm-hmm. This is why, right? It's like we need a piece of that as a remembrance, right? This is about remembering. It's about connecting. And so literally I'm writing a book on what this connection is all about, and it's going to be a big one. So we could talk for hours on this subject. I'm trying to condense it, but ultimately, through the many years and through the evolution of this relationship, and I say evolution, I'm not really seeing so much positivity come of this ongoing relationship. I'm seeing it devolving. I'm seeing us lose connection to the dog, losing connection to nature. I see us continuing to go more and more against the hardwired nature of the dog and turning it more into what is so for the human. So as we disconnect from what is so for the dog by not listening and not being attuned and letting the ego run, we are disrespecting the animal that we refer to as our best friend. Mm-hmm. Right? So I would love, if anything, to, in this podcast, spark about a new way of thinking, a new way of understanding these animals and this relationship, so that not only can we create the most extraordinary existence, which is the greatest gift that we can give, but it's looking at ourselves, right? First, we have to look at how we show up. And that's how we show up for ourselves, and then how that extends out to our dogs.
That's really exciting that you're working on a book. I was wondering if you had a book, and so any projection on possibly when you might put it out there to the public?
It's been in the works for a while, and it's going to be a big one. So we don't have a set date, but it's coming. It's coming sooner than I think.
I published a book last year, and believe me, I know the amount of work it takes behind the scenes. People have no clue when you pick up a book how much work went into it, but we'll be excited to see that. So many of the questions that I ask here, you've kind of already touched on, but I would like to elaborate a little bit more. So I know that negative and unacceptable behaviors that a dog exists actually stems from an owner's own issues and behaviors. What are some of the biggest issues that you encounter with your human clients that have with their dogs and the dogs have with their owners?
What I see across the board are very codependent relationships. So I see a lot of, and again, with all the best intentions, right? I think most people have really beautiful intentions towards their dogs. And so anything that I say here, it's just what is, it's not a good or bad or wrong or right or judgment or blame or shame, or I don't want people listening to this podcast and going, oh my God, I've hurt my dog, or I've done them such a disservice, or I'm the worst dog mom. I hear that. And it's like, no, not at all. It's just through understanding our dog's language and learning how to really step into our own power and our own lane. So I say this term a lot. It's about creating autonomy in the relationship with our dog. And then you're thinking, I think this is the healthiest way to create relationships with anybody and everything, period, right? Is allowing for the dog to be a dog, and you allowing for you to be you, and not projecting all of your humanized wants and needs onto the dog. This is very destructive. And we end up putting unconsciously a role and giving our dog a job description that they are simply not cut out to fulfill. So like any of us, if we were forced into a job description that was not within our wheelhouse, that was not within our literally our capabilities, This would add huge amounts of anxiousness and stress and nervous energy in our daily life. And so what we don't understand is that dogs live in a very black and white existence. It's the pack is successful and survives, or the pack is not successful and chaotic and out of balance, and then they die off. So dogs live in this, we need to be successful. That's their hardwired need. It's not even a desire, it's a need. And because we as humans don't know how, we're not equipped with the information and the knowledge and the tools and the technique and the language to be able to communicate that in all aspects of our relationship to them, we actually are setting them up to live less than quality lives. And so out of that core concept, it's literally the nucleus of the relationship that we have with our dogs. And because pretty much everybody's is out of whack and misaligned, it creates these undesirable stress-related behaviors like separation anxiety, like reactivity, like the overrated aggression. I hear a lot of people referring to their dogs as, my dog is aggressive. And I connect to the dog's energy and I think, this dog doesn't have an aggressive bone in its body, right? Because we don't know, we label things. And we label them improperly. And then, as I mentioned earlier, when we speak of things, we literally start to manifest and create that behavior. Whereas if we just change our narrative and start to tap into the dog in a language that they understand, all of a sudden, those ways of being disappear.
Mm-hmm.
So there's many behavioral challenges that I see come up daily and that people bring to me all the time. And the important thing to note here is that they all come from one reason and one reason only.
And what is that?
That a dog is very unclear about where they stand within their family pack hierarchy. And like all of us, we all want to know where we stand. It creates harmony, it creates stability, it creates ease and joy. And when we don't feel safe in that container, in the collective, it's very jarring. It's very stressy. It creates a lot of dis-ease in the mind, body, and spirit. And so by providing a dog the most up-leveled golden expression of leadership, which is what every dog is craving, that is by far and away the greatest gift that we could ever give them. It gives them the ideal life. And I do want to tap into something here because it's come up a lot. It's come up a real lot recently as I have launched my masterclass, The Embodied Alpha. A lot of people are really coming up against hard and defensive around the term alpha. And I understand why. Now, the term alpha has been battered and abused, okay? It's a real term. It's a scientific term in which the canine family, the canine species, as they form packs, understand in a hardwired nature that in order for the pack to be successful and survive, alpha leaders need to be in placement solidly. Now, what we as humans, through our egoic methods have done is we've turned the alpha into a barbarian, into an aggressor, into a dictator, into a controlling, domineering, scary, just almost a maniacal enforcer of will. I want everybody that listens to this podcast to understand that that is the opposite of what a true alpha leader is. The alpha embodiment is the lighthouse energy. Okay. It's the peaceful warrior.
I like that.
The ninja that comes bringing peace. When you are aligned within and you are peaceful and harmonious within, you never have to go outside of yourself to command or demand respect. It's organically given to you. Your energy attracts the honor and the respect of the ones around you, of the power of the collective. And so what I realize I have to spend a lot of time debunking these days is what a true nature, what is the true essence of an alpha, right? And this is what it is. It's not the the made up version that has been literally just projected and loud spoken over the internet. Especially, it goes beyond the dog industry. It goes beyond the dog training industry. It's what we see in politics. It's what we see in a lot in companies and corporations, and it's just not the way. And I think most humans resonate with that, right? And so it is about shifting, letting go of that old, outdated, whatever that was in the past, and really stepping into the true knowing of the purity, the authenticity of that alpha essence.
And what you're talking about there too, you developed something called the inner alpha method. So that's basically what you're talking about.
Precisely.
Well, so much of what you say runs really, really deep. And as a human being, we need to be introspective in our own self, and looking at what may be causing issues with our dog or our animals. I mean, even myself, I've been having issues, and I know I have a cat, but my cat has been keeping me awake at night till 3 or 4 in the morning, meowing, coming near me, and not shutting up. And I realized, instead of going and getting some meds for her to calm down, I'm looking into myself. I'm looking, what am I doing to projecting and causing this to take place? And I think that goes back to the old saying that if you want to change the world you see, change yourself first. And that's exactly what you've been saying, I do believe.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing and profound what can occur when we turn the lens, right? When we shine the camera back onto ourselves. It's amazing, through the accountability, through taking responsibility, through inner reflection. And really being the conscious observer. I ask all of my clients that I work with to just step back, just observe, just listen, spend time listening. And, even in what you just explained with your cat, animals are so attuned to us and the world and the environment, and they are tapped into things that literally surpass a human by light years. We will never, as a species, be anywhere close. They still have not even been able to develop technology that even comes close to a dog's sensory systems. And we probably won't. So instead of immediately trying to fix the behavior or jump on top of manipulating or trying to correct by using band-aid fixes or external methods of I would say support, but it's not support ultimately, right? You might get something to shift in the moment, but ultimately there's no true healing or transformation that's taking place. And so listen, ask your cat what's going on. Don't literally ask aloud, but speak to his or her soul
Mm-hmm.
and listen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree.
You might be blown away by what you're told.
Oh boy, I better prepare myself. But you're absolutely right. I do believe and understand that dogs and animals in general are far more tuned into the metaphysical and the energies of the universe than we can ever be. And so that's why we have to respect their abilities. And I think this is why, and I'm sure you've seen this over and over, there's tons of YouTube videos on this, of why animals have the ability to sense if a person is sick or dying, and they will just come and be near them and to be there for them, next to them. And I think that's why, because they're so tuned into that, and humans can't, or at least most people can't.
Yeah. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't, because again, a dog has a very different way of processing grief and death than we do. I have seen many dogs that have passed, and I watched the ceremony that their pack members and the dogs around them go through.
Mm-hmm.
I very recently, actually, when I was in Mexico, a very dear friend and teacher, canine, passed away tragically, and he was part of a pack of 5 dogs, and watching his body lay there as we were doing our ceremony, and I was completely attuned and observant of his pack members and how they were saying their goodbyes, how they were processing it. And it was completely different than all of the humans' way, right? Of course. So dogs are not attached. Humans are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so the pack mentality, I mean, is just inherent to the canine species. And I think that goes back to what you said earlier. Humans have to adapt to the understanding of the true meaning of alpha in order to be a good dog mom or a dog dad or a friend.
Yes, absolutely. And the good thing is that as dogs relate in packs, humans relate in tribes. So essentially, we're both pack animals. We both depend on the power of the collective to survive and be successful. And this is another thing, actually, that has come up, which has really given me a good chuckle. And I'd like to talk on it just for a minute or so. There has been, I would say, a grouping of people that have brought to my attention that dogs are not pack animals.
Okay.
Do you believe that? I know. I was just as shocked as you were right there, Carl. So what I want people to understand, that it doesn't matter how much over generation after generation you take a dog out of their natural element. You cannot change the fact that they are a pack animal, because in their spirit, in their nature, in their psychology, they will always be pack animals. And when you see over and over dogs that live alone, meaning they're the solo dog in a pack. They might live with one human, they might live with 5 humans. When I tap into these dogs' energy, there is something really big that's missing. And whenever I encourage those clients to fulfill that void in the dog's experience with another canine pack member, boom, 1,000 out of 1,000 times, that dog, the current dog's life completely changes for the better. The life quality is enhanced through the roof. Whether it's an old dog that becomes decrepit and shut down and just lets the world go by, it's lost its zest. You bring another dog into that pack, again, 1,000 out of 1,000 times, I watch that old dog turn into a puppy again. Mm-hmm. So I want everybody to understand that there's no one person that can debunk the alpha theory. There's not one person that can tell you that dogs are pack animals, because they are. And the more that we start to tread down those lines of thinking, the more disconnected we come from the true nature of the canine species.
Wow. Again, everything you're saying, it just resonates beautifully with me. And I've got so many questions and thoughts. One of the best things I saw a few months ago, I saw a cartoon. And it was a shot from behind, a cartoon of a man had his dog on a leash, and they were walking down a dirt trail on a beautiful spring day. And, the cartoons, they had the little balloons over the heads with the whatever they're thinking or saying. Well, the man had the balloon over his head, and he had lightning bolts and skull and crossbones, and it's a beautiful day. And over the dog's head was a picture that reflected the beautiful nature around them as they were walking around. Just the dog is in the now always, and there's something that we certainly need to learn from our dogs too. Eckhart Tolle would be very proud of his dog.
Absolutely, and that's brilliant. I love that. It's beautiful because it so accurately describes what is going on in very simplistic way, right? The human is the lightning bolt and the ego and the negative thoughts and what am I doing next? And oh, my life is horrible. And oh, I need more money. And oh, all the things. And then the dog is just pure presence, pure presence. And that, I feel, is absolutely one of the greatest teachings, one of the greatest gifts our dogs give us on a daily basis. And whether we're conscious of it or not, we can feel it. We can feel it.
Well, I'll have to see if I can find that cartoon again, and I'll send it to you.
I would love it. Please.
Yeah, that'll be great. Let's talk about a couple other key things. I know that you definitely, I was looking at your beautiful website, Canine State of Mind, about nutrition of what we feed our dogs. And you're really big on holistic type of food and nutrition for our dogs. If you could expound on that.
Yeah. Well, as we look at the ideal scenario for our dogs, it's not just how we treat them and how we communicate with them and how we relate to them and how we set them up, but it's how we nourish them. Mm-hmm. It's how we support them in their body, because the support that we give to their body is ultimately what affects their spirit and their mind. It's what fuels them. And unfortunately, when we look at the dog food industry and what is readily accessible and promoted by a lot of vets as well, which is a really unfortunate thing for me, but it's not about me. It's about all of the dogs and all of my clients that are misguided into feeding our dogs biologically species inappropriate rations. So it comes down to just simple logical thinking here. Do you eat sugary, salty, preservative-filled crackers loaded with all different kinds of toxins every meal of your life?
Yeah, maybe some people do, but not me.
Well, I think that a lot of people have very poor eating habits, but I bet you the vast majority of them have way more variety and don't sit and eat saltines every meal of their life. So essentially, we have to look at what do our dogs need to thrive? What do they need to be wildly, abundantly healthy, right? We need to feed them in a way that is what their systems are designed to eat, right? A dog is not designed to eat dry food. A dog is not designed to eat kibble. It has become a very convenient way, a convenient and cheap way of feeding our animals, our dogs. And this goes for cats as well. Now, when we look at the actual lifespan of a dog, which is into their 30s, okay? Nowadays, when we get dogs that live to their 13, 14, 15, a very common phrase I hear is, oh, my dog lived a really long life. And I always think to myself, well, no, their life was cut in half. That wasn't a long life. It wasn't the life that they actually were destined to live. But because of what we feed our dogs and what is in it, I can't quite call it food, but it definitely keeps them alive for a certain amount of time. And I wouldn't say that time alive is quality, because what we're doing, and I really could go down a rabbit hole here, so I'm gonna kind of gauge myself. But what we're doing is we're kicking their immune system into overdrive, into fight or flight mode every day of their life by the food that we feed them, for the most part. If it's a biologically species inappropriate diet, we are basically creating such a level of anti-inflammatory nature in their body that causes a myriad of different ailments and conditions and diseases. And we see this coming up in very young dogs. So we have to be able to, and I am creating, later this year, I will be coming out with my own line of dog and cat food, which is going to be off the charts amazing. There's nothing like it on the market. And it's going to be about the healing, right? Food is medicine. And when we feed a dog appropriately, we allow for optimum wellness across the board. So it's very important that we understand, what are we feeding our dog? When are we feeding our dog? How are we feeding our dog? Really knowing what is in the food that we are in the rations that we give to our dog, right? I think if most people actually started to do a little investigation into that, they would be horrified, absolutely horrified. And what's interesting too is I work with a lot of very intelligent people, a lot of people that are holistically minded. They're making very healthy choices, very ethical choices for how they feed themselves. But for whatever reason, they don't connect it for their animal. So they're feeding themselves at the highest of quality, optimum nutrition, but then their dog is eating a degrading bag of hydrogenated toxins. So this is not fair. And it's not fair to our dogs, and we owe it to them to feed them in a way that nourishes them and excites them. Don't ask me, this is not up to me. All you need to do is take 2 bowls, fill one with dry food. Same with the cat, same with your beautiful cat. Fill one with dry food and fill the other with a very high quality raw food, which I would like to touch on that, because as I say, all dry dog food is inappropriate. All dry dog food is the same. Okay. It doesn't matter if it's a $20 bag or a $150 bag of dry food. It's all the same. Now, all raw food is not created equal. Okay. Just because it's raw, that doesn't mean that it's awesome and healthy and wonderful and that you should feed it to your dog. In fact, there's a lot of companies out there that are not sourcing, are not formulating, and not adding ingredients that are optimal. So as you take a bowl of high quality raw food and then a bowl of dry food, put it in front of your dog or cat and let them make the choice. Because they know what's best for them. They know what supports them. They know what is nutritionally important for them. And they will tell you. So again, don't ask me, just ask your dog or your cat.
Wow, this is so much great information. We're talking to Sasha Armstrong, canine behaviorist, dog shaman, and everything you said here is just phenomenal. We're going to wind up here in a little bit, but you touched on a subject that I have thought about for a very long time, the lifespan of a dog. And it generally, I've had 2 golden retrievers that have lasted to 14 years old. And I always wondered, was it possible for them to live longer? And I mean, I know I'm not the only one. When both of my Goldens passed away, I cried like a little baby, and I was, in midlife. And so most people, when their dogs or their cats or whatever their pet is passes away, it's crushing. And even many people take it to even more grief than if they lost a relative. But the fact is, do you believe it is possible, if we do these correct things, that our pets, our dogs, can live longer?
Yes, 1,000,000%. But Carl, we also need to look at a lot of other areas of what the dog and the cat is consuming. Our dogs and cats live the most toxic lives, from the vaccines that we give them, to the grass that they eat, to the water that they drink, to the flea and tick preventatives that we give them every month, to all of the preventative medication that we invade their body with unnecessarily, the cleaning products that we use, the candles that we burn in our home, the air that exists within the home environment. I mean, it's literally, they're just being infiltrated with one toxin after the other. And so when we start to look at and bring awareness to what is in the products that we use, how is it affecting our dogs? How is it affecting us? How is it affecting our children? And then we can start to shift and cleanse our environments, the mind, body, and spirit temples, the environments, right? Then that is when we literally can create longevity and vitality and abundance that exceeds anything that we have come to know, what's become the norm. But we have to go layer by layer, and we can't just treat a dog's behavior and think that that's the end, right? It's let alone what the craze is all the time now is pharmaceuticals. It absolutely destroys me to see the amount of dogs that come to me that are challenged with behavioral stress related issues due to the information that their humans give them. And instead of the human learning about how to change their behavior so they can change their dog's experience, they just give them a pharmaceutical to numb them down and shut them down and compromise their immune systems. This is what I'm saying with disconnection.
Mm-hmm.
None of these dogs need pharmaceuticals. And I want everybody listening to this podcast to know that there is a way that you can heal and transform the behavior like that without using anything unnatural, anything synthetic, anything that continues to put a block and a barrier between you and your animal. There's a way to bring the connection back so that you can have freedom and you don't have to rely on pills or gadgets or any kind of abuse tactics or anything that don't work. They just simply don't work.
Wow, and everything you just said there, so much of that can be applied to our relationship with our children and our friends and our family and fellow man too. Whew, wow, this is great. So much that you have here. I mean, there's so much fantastic information here. You've really explained to us on how intricately and intimately humans are intertwined with our canine friends and other pets and animals. And it's so important. And I'm so glad that you've been on this show. And thank you, Sasha. It's been phenomenal. I just may have to have you back on again soon for another information-packed show. And one last thing, you do all these beautiful workshops and master classes. How can people connect to you? What's your website?
Yeah, thank you, Carl. Well, the best way to find me is my website, which is caninestateofmind.com, and that's spelled out CANINE, stateofmind.com. And then, of course, you can find me on Instagram, and it's the same handle, Canine State of Mind. And there's ways to, book a call with me to get a little bit more connection and deeper information on my programs. And you can do that on my website.
Well, I'm guessing you will never be lacking for business. So this is a good thing.
It's busy. I'm nonstop, that's for sure.
Awesome.
Keep it coming.
Sasha, thank you so much. Namaste for being on World Awakenings. I much appreciate it.
Thank you, Carl. It's a treasure.
This has been another episode of World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with host Carl Gruber, a certified law of attraction life coach. We welcome you to tune in to each and every episode of World Awakenings as we open your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to the truth of all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how much they play an all-important role in our moment-to-moment daily life. Much love and light to you, my friend, and thank you for tuning into World Awakenings.